pjnet.tv. Good evening. On the East Coast, it is 9 p.m. If that's equivalent to the time where you're at. You're watching this live as the bumper rolls. We are recording. We are streaming. We have a first-time guest standing by. We will start a countdown to Studio 40 Alpha starting now. Well, good evening. Welcome. This is pjnet.tv. It's a brand new week. I am your host, Coach Prasick, and you need to rivet yourself to the screen as you have stopped scrolling, because we are going to take on some tough stuff, and we're not afraid to do that. And to help us take on the tough questions, hopefully with some tough love answers, or at least biblically based answers, is our first time guest who is with us right now in the wintry studios, even though she is not in the snow, I'm pretty sure. Barb Winters joins us tonight. Barb Winters is the wife of a pastor, and she has a family, grown children, I believe, and she is here to, in a broad sense, offer some parenting advice, although I can hear what you're thinking. Preacher's kids, they're pretty much perfect, and I don't know what advice Barb might have, but your perfect children didn't need a lot of parenting. But tell us how to parent children, especially those when we are confronted with some discoveries that are heartbreaking.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it. So I am a pastor's wife, but that actually does not mean my children are perfect. Just like yours, they have lots of struggles. So we had moved to Florida about 6 years ago when we found out that one of our sons was struggling with pornography. We actually found out that he was watching it, and the day I found out is just a day that is seared in my memory. Just can't, it was a day that my mom life changed, and we were unaware that this was happening in our home. We had talked about pornography a little bit. We had done the talk like most parents, and we had talked with them about biblical principles. I was a homeschool mom. We had taught them right from wrong. We assumed that they knew what was going on. We had put sex in the biblical way, in the sense that you wait till you're married and it's a good thing. But we had no idea that he was curious, that he had started watching, and that he was looking at it. So the day we found out, I was completely devastated. And I had all those feels that most parents have when they find out something traumatic is going on in their home. I felt sad. I felt mad. I felt hurt. I felt betrayed. I felt guilty, all those things, but mostly I felt lonely. And we did some things to help him. And he was on board with that for a little while, but about a year or so later, we found out that he was still struggling. And he was 16 the second time we found out, and realized that this was a really huge problem. He was, in fact, addicted. And so we really leaned in. We leaned on God, of course. We helped him with his problem. And as he progressed, as he healed, as he started to break free from this struggle that he was dealing with, I started doing a lot of research. Like I said, I was devastated. And as a mom, I didn't know what to do. But one of the things I didn't think I could do was turn to other people and tell them what was going on in our own home, especially since we were the pastor and the pastor's wife. So it's not like I could turn to my best friend over coffee and say, hey, my son struggles with porn. How about yours? So just not something that you would typically have a conversation about. So as I was researching, one of the things I found out was how prevalent it is in our homes, even those of us who are in the church. And I found out statistics like 92% of boys and 63% of girls see pornography before age 18. And truthfully, that statistic is so old, I hate to even quote it anymore. But when I read that, I thought, oh my word, all these children are watching pornography. And that means all these parents have children who are watching pornography. And why aren't we talking about it? If it's that prevalent and that pervasive, then why aren't we having conversations? And so I decided to be that mom. And I started a website at hopefulmom.net. And I now encourage and I support parents of children who have been exposed to pornography. And it's been an adventure. One of my big things is that I want to make sure that parents know they're not alone. And I just come alongside them and try and offer them mostly emotional support, but a lot of practical tips also. So that's how I ended up in this space.
Well, I did go to your website, and I've got it on the screen, hopefulmom.net. And I went back, I think it's about 3 or 4 blogs ago, where you kind of describe, and if I remember right, it isn't like you barged into his room unannounced and he's in front of a screen. Your situation, he actually, he brought it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So initially he brought it up to us because he was threatened. A bogus warning came to his screen while he was watching
Uh-huh.
pornography, and they threatened him basically that if he didn't pay money,
Mm-hmm.
that they would turn him in to the police. So initially he thought that he was about to get arrested, and he came to us in a panic. Now the second time he came to us out of remorse and really a desire to change. At that point, he wanted to get better. He had been at a youth event in which the youth director was telling the kids about an event that had happened in his home and how pornography had ruined his parents' marriage. And a light bulb went off for him that if he didn't get a grip on this, he might end up ruining his future marriage. And so it was at that time that he came back to us again and said, this is still a problem and I need help.
Wow. Well, there's better prospects for recovery. Even I so admire, Barb, that you're taking this on, because so much of church culture in particular
Mm-hmm.
are using two coping mechanisms to quote deal with the problem. One is denial, and
Yeah.
the other is ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Right. And the ignorance piece is the piece that I want to come alongside people and say, look, we need to educate ourselves. We need to talk about it, educate ourselves, and then educate our children beginning at a young age. And we need to not be afraid of it anymore. So, yes, I have a lot of resources, but I like to tell parents, let's not be afraid of this conversation, because when I was growing up, we didn't say the word pornography. We said inappropriate pictures, and we whispered, and it was like we kind of talked behind our backs if we referred to it at all, but it wasn't as prevalent. And so we didn't know about it. And that's where I fell short as a parent, is that I didn't know and I didn't understand and I didn't educate my children. So one of the tips that I give moms or dads or whoever is that talk about it at a young age. And if you're not used to saying words, then just stand in front of a mirror and start saying them until you feel comfortable. And then go to your children and start that. You might trip over your tongue a time or two. When I first started talking with my son about it, it was awkward. There were moments where we were both kind of staring at the floor and kind of shuffling back and forth, and it was just, it's strange, but that's okay. Our kids need to know that we're human too, and that we can stumble through the tough stuff, and we can show that, hey, we're vulnerable enough to say these words. We're vulnerable enough to have this conversation because we want you to know that we care about you and we want to protect you. And when we're the ones that go to our children first, then we become the experts. We become the credible ones so that when they do stumble on it or when a friend shows them, because that's probably going to happen, then they know they can come to us and say, look, here's what's going on in my world.
Well, in addition to denial and ignorance, I think even today that we have an attitude of minimalizing the issue. Let me give you an example. Tonight you have said, these children have seen pornography. Well, folks, the fact that they've seen pornogaphy that's a problem, but that's not the problem. When we say they've seen pornography, it makes it kind of sound like, well, they were just driving down the road and there was this sign up on the road, No. I think the vast majority of pornography is not stumbled into accidentally. It is intentionally chosen. Now, there are some psychologists that will explain when we say addiction, we're not talking about like you're addicted to chocolate.
Right.
We're not talking about that kind of. There is a neurosynapse sequence of synapses. Right. There are endorphins. There are chemical reactions that take place in the brain when you're engaged in pornography or biblical sexual activities, for that matter, between a husband and a wife. I mean, sex is something that God built into us.
Absolutely.
But I don't think, even though the statistics that you mentioned should be alarming, I think it is far more pervasive and deep-rooted. And why is it? The internet.
Yeah, well, they have pornography at their fingertips. And a lot of children actually are stumbling on it at a younger age. Now, when they get a little bit older, because the average age of first exposure is 11, but you've got 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds stumbling across it accidentally because of the algorithms. I mean, pornography wants to be found, and it's looking for our children. That's how the industry is set up. But yeah, we're handing them devices and saying, hey, here's a device, and we're unaware of how easily accessible pornography is, or at least I was unaware. And we're making our children say no to it all day long. And so I like to use the analogy that we don't put a pile of drugs on a coffee table in our home and tell our children to walk around it all day long and just say no, 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 no. Right. No, we wouldn't do that. We protect them. We keep it locked up in our cabinets, or we put it high up so that they can't access it. And that's what I want to tell parents with devices and pornography. Look, if you're going to hand them a device, make sure that the proper filters are on there. Put filters on your Wi-Fi and put filters on the device, and use those parental controls and have the conversation so that when their friend shows it to them or whatever happens, or if they get curious, because yeah, you're right, they do search for it. Mostly it's out of curiosity or because somebody brought it up and they don't know what it means, or they're just interested. And then they open up this Pandora's box. I mean, it's crazy what they end up seeing, because it's not like your father or your grandfather's Playboy. We're talking totally different things than what we would have seen when we were kids.
Right. We're not talking about simple nudity.
Right.
That was, back in the day, somebody's dad would have the Playboys, and they'd go out of town and we'd go raid the closet, and that kind of thing. It's gotten far more explicit and graphic and evil. It's really evil. And now, violent. The first line of defense, as you said, would be to do some things to limit access, do those steps. But I'm more concerned in the spiritual root problem here. Okay. Today, I choose not to smoke. It's not because cigarettes aren't available to me. They are. So just removing the object of the temptation is a good first step. and should be
Right.
taken. But the real problem is, I don't think that, or in my opinion, is that we don't take it serious that God has some things to say about our conduct, and well, we don't like them. We prefer sin sometimes over obedience.
True.
The root problem, if you attack that, if you develop your love for Jesus Christ, I'll give you an example. I'm kind of going around the bush here. I was in line at a convenience store, and the girl in front of me, let's just say she was wearing tight jeans, okay? If there would have been a quarter in her back pocket, I could have told you if it was heads or tails facing out. I mean, And it dawned upon me, and I replaced that image with, did you watch the movie The Passion when they flogged, scourged
Oh, yeah.
Jesus?
Yeah.
So I put that image in my mind
Mm-hmm.
and said, this is the price that was paid.
Right.
So do you want to indulge? Because the price has been paid, but here's what Jesus paid for this. Is it worth it? And that helped. Because now now we're addressing the spiritual problem. Okay. I read in your blog that many parents feel like they've failed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's stigma. There's there's some negative, and we've got to break through these barriers because they're actually making matters worse.
Right. Right. Yeah, we don't want to shame. And whether it's your spouse or whether it's yourself or whether it's your children, we don't want to shame someone because, um, we have these tendencies, sinful and flesh, and our flesh and the spirit are fighting each other, and we want to make sure that we do bring the grace and the mercy in, and we want to make sure that we communicate that we love unconditionally. And so, yeah, one of the things that really helped me was I had this idea that people who watch pornography were monsters. And so when I found this out about my son, I couldn't figure out, well, how do I see him? I mean, for a while I always had a hard time even kind of interacting with him because I couldn't figure out how to picture him, if you will. And when I thought about the pornography industry and how Satan works and how this stuff invades our home, and I realized that he was a victim. He was a victim of society turning their backs, like you've said, or parts of society that says it's okay. He was a victim because he asked somebody to show him pictures, and that person should have told him no, but they didn't. They showed it to him. And so when I wrapped my brain around the fact that he and a lot of people are victims, because it starts out so innocently, then I could interact with him better, and I could offer that grace and that mercy and that unconditional love that he really needed in order to progress and heal. And eventually, even my husband helped me see that he's a potential victor,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
this makes them stronger
Hmm.
because when you know Christ because of the redemptive power, when you walk through these problems and traumas and behaviors and come out the other side he whole and even better and surviving and thriving, then we see God's grace and we see his redemptive power and we are victors. And so I say he's my hero because he's the one who actually walked through it all. I mean, I walked beside him, but he was the one that
Well,
did the hard.
but you did, and here's the distinction. Okay, if we don't come alongside, there is a support group out there that will come along their side and encourage them and tell them that this is a natural release of sexual tensions, where that's harmless. It's there's even, they would even go so far as to say it's healthy, and it's not. I wish we had more time, but before we leave, you have been kind of journaling through this, and a book is going to come out the other end.
Yes, yes. So I do have a book that I have a contract for. It will be released in summer of 2023. So a little while to
Right
go
around the
yet.
corner, folks. If you've got some children just born now, it'll be out by the time that they reach puberty. Okay.
So, but I'm really excited about it. It's the working title is Healthy Relationships in a Hookup World. So we
Uh-huh.
explore why relationships are deteriorating, habits of healthy relationships, and restoring relationships that have been hurt by sexually pitfall behaviors. So, yeah, I'm excited about it.
Well, Barb, I do wish we had more time. Maybe we'll have you come back again. We're
That,
not going to wait for your book to come out, I hope, before that happens. But Barb, thank you. You are a champion. Many of the people in the church that are leading the charge are men.
yeah.
And you are the first woman that I'm aware of that has actually grappled with this dragon. And I just admire your dragon slaying, and I appreciate your ministry, and I wish there were more that we had to offer, but whatever we have to offer, consider it yours, and visit us from time to time, and just keep doing the good work in your ministry. And it's a big problem out there. Thanks for tackling it.
Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to talk about it.
Glad to have you, Barb. Thank you. Well, folks, that was Barb Winters. That wasn't so hard, was it? Did you get uncomfortable in at any time during that? No. I'm talking to the audience. She can still hear me. Yeah, you ought to see her now. Yeah. I hope it did make you uncomfortable. So uncomfortable that you'll actually make some changes. Because it's tough out there. I admire Barb's courage. And we're fighting a spiritual battle, it says in Ephesians chapter 6. And in addition to the armor, we are going to need some courage. So I challenge you to ask yourself this question, or actually two of them. What is the boldest thing you've ever done for the kingdom of Jesus Christ? The second question is, well, how long ago was that? If we're going to be bold, we can't allow ourselves to be satisfied with either answer.